Rick. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing well.
Well, we are here with Rick Doblin, the president and founder of MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, at the Impact Week in Barcelona, where you have given a talk on globalizing the access to MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for PTSD.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's your first presentation in Barcelona, no?
Yes.
First time speaking here and opening the space.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been quite a conference.
Yeah, no?
Quite interesting group of philanthropists and investors and activists.
And you have always been very involved and aligned with this concept of impact, no? Making impact with your work and with psychedelic assisted psychotherapy worldwide, no?
Yes.
So we're going to talk a little bit about a few things. First of all, how were the phase 3 studies, no? And to contextualize that, and for being optimistic, the first studies, the phase 2 studies, they took a lot of years to be complete, a lot of time to people get involved and participate as participants. And then the phase 3 studies were complete in 3 years, involving 15 sites, and completing and publishing them in a very short time. So, and having a waiting list in all the studies, no? Like many people wanting to participate also and not being able because they were already full, no? So this is good news, but also the results were very, very positive, no? Can you explain to us?
Yeah, so it took 30 years from the start of MAPS in 1986 to 2016, where we had a meeting with the FDA called the end of phase 2 meeting, where we discussed how to move, said that we thought we were ready to move to phase 3. FDA said yes to that, but I knew that it was going to be very difficult to do a successful double-blind study, and so I knew we had to negotiate with FDA every detail of phase 3. So we engaged in 8 months of negotiations.
So they were involved in the helping you developing
It's called the Special Protocol Assessment process.
Okay.
And we negotiated for 8 months, and then in the end, the FDA agreed with us on what the design would be. And we have a formal agreement letter, and the biggest issue there is that the FDA said that they wanted us to design the study with therapy with inactive placebo versus therapy with full dose MDMA, and full awareness that the double blind was not going to work. But then they said there's 2 main areas to reduce experimenter bias. One is random assignment, then the other is independent raters assessing the PTSD symptoms. So we did both of those.
Okay.
And the reason that we didn't do active placebo is that I thought that the best way to do it would be therapy with low dose MDMA versus therapy with full dose MDMA.
Okay.
And that would be the active placebo. Everybody would know they're getting MDMA. The challenge was to find the dose that's high enough so that there's some activity, so that there could be some confusion with the full dose.
Yeah.
But is it so high that you get such therapeutic potential that you can't tell a difference between the groups? And so microdosing doesn't work because it's too low. So that's what we basically spent 16 years doing research, and we looked at therapy with inactive placebo, therapy with 25 milligrams, 30, 40, 50, 75, 100, 125, and 150 milligrams.
The way we did have this experience.
We sort of covered this whole range. And what we discovered to our surprise is that I was half right and half wrong. The right part was that lower doses did produce a little bit more blinding, a little bit more confusion if it was low dose or full dose. Although even then, many people could tell. But that the low doses activated people but didn't have enough fear reduction. This is severe PTSD patients. And so they felt uncomfortable. They got better, but the people that got therapy with no MDMA got better than the people that had therapy with low dose MDMA. Then we were surprised that the 75 milligram dose group was really very effective. So there was no sweet spot where the doses aren't compromising the therapy or starting to really help the therapy a lot. So we went to the FDA and we said we would be glad to give you blinding, but you're going to make it easier for us to see a difference between the 2 groups if what we're trying to figure out is what's therapy by itself and then what is when you add MDMA. And so we said to the FDA, the real question is, we think, if you can do this with therapy without MDMA, why do it? And the blinding is not perfect anyway, even with these lower doses. So FDA said, do therapy with low dose, with inactive placebo versus therapy with low dose. Okay, so then we get an agreement letter, everything's set, then we do, starting in 2018, took us about 4 years to get all the phase 2 studies done. We had a lot of problems with the pandemic, slowing the first one down. And so the results for both of them were published in Nature Medicine. Well, the first study, severe PTSD, people have averaged 14 years of PTSD, some longer, some of the veterans were a little bit shorter. We had almost all of them had tried other therapies, both pharmacotherapy and psychotherapy, and it still not helped them. And what we showed was that the therapy with inactive placebo, and the treatment is 42 hours of therapy, 3 8-hour experimental sessions, either with MDMA or inactive placebo, and then 12 90-minute non-drug psychotherapy sessions, 3 before the first MDMA session, preparation, build the therapeutic alliance, 3 after each MDMA session for the integration process. And what we showed is that the people that got therapy with no MDMA at all, inactive placebo, 32% of them no longer had PTSD. Now, which is incredibly good. It's comparable basically to the results that you get from SSRIs or the results you get from prolonged exposure or cognitive processing therapy, except for the fact that we had a very, very low dropout rate. And the studies that have been done with other psychotherapies, prolonged exposure, cognitive processing therapy, show that half the people drop out. It's re-traumatizing to do the therapy, just focus on the trauma over and over. So we had comparable results, but with pretty much everybody with a very, very low dropout rate. And when you hear about the results from these other psychotherapies, it's only those people that made it through. The half that dropped out are not really counted.
And what was the percentage of the dropout in your study?
What?
The percentage of people, the dropout.
Okay, so 32% no longer had PTSD from the therapy without MDMA, but then when you add MDMA, then it's more than twice as good. It's 67%. Another 21% had what's called clinically significant reductions in PTSD symptoms, meaning they still had PTSD, but there was meaningful change in their life because of the symptom reduction. So we had basically 12% non-responders and 88% responders. Second phase 3 study was moderate to severe. The first was severe PTSD. The second was moderate to severe PTSD. 3/4 of the people were severe PTSD, 1/4 was moderate. And what we showed here was astonishing results with the therapy with inactive placebo. 47.6% no longer had PTSD.
So even better than
now,
the first.
So now our therapists have gotten more practice. There was a little bit more moderate to severe. In 1/4, as I said, were moderate, 3/4 were severe PTSD. And so the results that we now got in the therapy with inactive placebo were better than any of the other psychotherapies. And again, we had a very low dropout. But when you add MDMA, it went up to 72.6%. So, and then another roughly 16% had clinically significant reductions. So again, similar, about 12% non-responders. First study was statistically significant, 1 in 10,000 chance that it was random. And then the second one was 1 in 2,500 chance that it was random.
Very significant.
And when you multiply them together, which is the way you would consider them independent studies, it's 1 in 25 million that the results that we've got have something to do with some random factor other than the MDMA. So highly significant. In the first phase 3 study, we had one woman try to kill herself twice. We had another woman, severe suicidal ideation, checked herself in the hospital not to kill herself. Turned out both were in the placebo group. We had none of that in the MDMA group. We had no problems like that in the second phase 3 study. So we felt that we had a very acceptable safety database and outstanding efficacy and a protocol design that was agreed to by the FDA that they selected.
Well, in fact, a part of being published in Nature, which is a very well recognized and high factor impact journal, Science considered MDMA as a psychotherapy for PTSD one of the 10th more significant
Yeah,
uh,
2021.
in 2021. Can you explain us a little bit about that?
Yeah,
How
the
was this
journal
process?
Science at the end of the year ranks what are all the different scientific discoveries of the year. And there's one winner, and then there's 9 runner-ups that are not ranked. The winner in 2021 was protein folding, figured out by AI.
Yeah.
And then our first phase 3 study in Nature Medicine was one of the top 10 scientific breakthroughs of the year.
But these scientific breakthroughs, not scientific breakthroughs in medicine, not
in all of
in
science.
So
in
it
all
was
of science.
one of the 10 the most significant innovations in all science in this year.
Yes, and I think it was both because of our study, but because of the whole field.
Okay.
That MAPS was leading the edge. There was psilocybin research that was looking very promising, but we were the best example and the furthest along.
Okay, so it was.
So we went into the applications to the FDA thinking that they would say yes.
Delivered at a
Because you have very good results in the studies. How was the total? How many people participated in both studies in total?
The first study, each we were going to have 100 people. The first one, because of the pandemic, we ended with 90 people. The second had 100.
Okay, so almost 200 total.
Yeah.
So with very good results, better than in the treatment for PTSD. Published in Nature and Science saying it was one of the best innovations.
Yeah.
So and then what happened with FDA basically?
Well, what happened was that the pharmaceutical company, Lykos, made a fundamental mistake.
Okay.
And that fundamental mistake was to think that the culture no longer mattered, the scientific critiques no longer mattered, that we were now in where it was a rational process, and all that mattered was our data.
Yeah.
And they said traditional pharma companies have a quote quiet period. They don't talk in the media. They don't explain anything. So that's okay for a drug that nobody knows about. That's not one of the most popular medical drugs in the world.
Yeah.
And also MAPS attracted critics.
Yeah.
And so Lykos did not respond to the critics, blocked me and MAPS from responding.
Oh, wow.
Imposed a quiet period on themselves and on MAPS. And said I was on the board of directors of Lykos. That's why I was supposed to speak whatever the company said, and MAPS had to speak as well, and the MAPS board agreed. And so Lykos took their eye off the culture and off of the critics, and basically lost control of the narrative.
Okay.
And so the critics get the building. There was a critique in JAMA Psychiatry in May of 2023 about a therapeutic method. I couldn't respond.
Demand generation.
Lykos decided not to respond.
Okay, this was Lykos decision.
This was Lykos decisions controlling MAPS through the MAPS board.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, the tail wagging the dog.
Yeah.
And so what happened is the negativity built up.
Yeah.
Lykos didn't respond.
Yeah.
And there was a series of evaluations, and then it became more and more, oh, we don't like your double blind. You didn't use an active placebo. We don't understand your therapy. Your therapy is anything goes, things like that. So what happened is that all this negativity influenced the FDA advisory committee.
This was in June, even before the final decision. It was this.
This was
advisory
June 4th, 2 months before the final decision. Okay. And one of the tragedies here was that there was a lot of misinformation, a lot of doubts, and those could have explained, but they didn't. If we would have engaged all of this beforehand.
Okay.
And so the FDA advisory committee was really negative. Now, what Lykos also failed to do was to tell people about the Dutch State Committee on MDMA. So Lykos shut down all the research that MAPS had started in Europe in early 2023. We'd had research in the Netherlands, in the Czech Republic, in Germany, in England, all shut down by Lykos. They said, we don't have the money to do it. We're just going to concentrate on the US.
Okay.
And we're going to put all this money into US commercialization. And then what happened was that the Dutch government had seen positive benefits from this therapy.
Okay.
The principal investigator was the chief psychiatrist for the Dutch Ministry of Defense. And now they're seeing people getting better from PTSD with MDMA-assisted therapy. So they put up their own committee, the equivalent of the FDA advisory committee.
Okay.
Except they had real subject matter experts. They had a year to review the same data the FDA advisory committee reviewed in a couple of weeks. And they had to justify whatever conclusions by not just saying, oh, in an 8-hour meeting, I vote this, that. They had to write a book report of justice. So they wrote a book-length report, and they came to the exact opposite conclusions
Uh-huh.
that the FDA advisory
It's like
committee.
opposite
The
conclusion.
exact opposite. They said
Wow.
efficacy was proven, safety was proven. The Dutch
Yeah.
government should immediately move to approve what they called naturalist studies,
Yeah.
compassionate use with data
Uh-huh.
before and after.
Yeah.
And on top of that, they came out June 6th, 2 days later, after the FDA advisory
Wow.
committee, and Lycos decided not to let anybody know. And they decided to block me from and Maps from letting people know
Uh-huh.
about it.
And you know why this
They
decisions?
just, I think they wanted to, I don't know why. There's no real good sense
Okay.
why they did that.
Yeah.
They just don't have a good sense of strategy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They
Yeah,
just are traditional medical
Okay.
pharma. They don't understand culture. They
yeah,
don't
the whole
the
things
whole
that are
thing
involving, yeah.
with psychedelics. And they
Yeah.
came in after we had done all this work with FDA, after decades and decades of changing.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? So they took too much for granted.
No, and you also put that in context. You did your PhD specifically in this field of
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
how
and
to
how to
or
deal
with
with the double
marijuana,
blind.
but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
so
your field of expertise.
then they ended up trying between the 2 months between the FDA advisory committee meeting and the FDA decision.
Yeah.
Their strategy was again fundamentally flawed because they tried a political strategy mostly, and they had 19 senators, 61 members of the House of Representatives write a letter to the president of the United States, the head of the FDA, saying we need this medicine.
Okay, so
But the
political,
FDA doesn't want to respond to politics; they
Yeah.
want to respond to science.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
like us, they could have talked to people about the FDA advisory committee
Mhm.
critiques of how they made their decisions, and they could have talked about the Dutch State Committee on MDMA.
Yeah,
but they
yeah,
didn't do either of those really
yeah,
very well.
Yeah.
They certainly didn't tell people about the Dutch State Committee, and so they lost control of the narrative. They tried overly political, and then the FDA rejected
yeah,
completely. And now there is discussions about what is going to be necessary to go forward.
yeah.
So the FDA will approve, something will happen. I think it's delayed a couple of years,
Uh-huh.
but what are they going to do now? And now that Trump has been elected and is Robert Kennedy Jr. is talking about the reforming the FDA
Yeah.
and they're pro psychedelics.
But truly,
Yeah.
you think it's gonna be someone who's gonna oppose, or is gonna
No, I
be
think they would be supportive.
supportive? Yeah.
We have bipartisan support. We work with veterans. We have a lot of Republican support.
Okay.
So we just don't know what
How?
will come out, and that negotiations are taking place now between the company and the FDA.
Yeah.
The FDA is now running scared because the new people are going to come in. They don't care about science as much. They
Uh-huh.
don't like the FDA.
Yeah.
And so I think that either way, whatever happens, in 3 years, MDMA will become a medicine.
Okay.
What I worry about it might not have a lot of therapy. It might be
Yeah.
minimal therapy,
Yeah.
psychological support.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I think we need to end
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, do you think at least in 2-3 years it's gonna be legal anyways,
As a medicine. I think
even
that
though all these things are
even though we have a
happening?
Republican president, even though FDA said no, I think
Yeah.
it will become a medicine
Yeah.
for PTSD
Yeah.
by this pharma company.
Yeah.
But whether it's with a lot of therapy or not, whether insurance will cover the therapy, that's the tragedy, is
Yeah.
that in America, we don't have really good coverage of mental health.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't have insurance. The people that often most are traumatized don't have insurance.
Yeah.
And so whatever gets approved, if it's minimal therapy, then insurance is probably not going to cover more than that.
Uh-huh.
So it's not about MAPS, was basically about optimized therapeutic outcomes.
Uh-huh.
And Lycos is about minimum viable products.
Okay.
So we'll see. And I
Uh-huh.
think the big message I want to leave you with and leave the other listeners about the whole field has taken this wrong message, I think, from the FDA.
Yeah.
That they need to move away from therapy. Just give drugs, like the same with Spravato.
Yeah.
Spravato is a big success now, $1 billion a year sales
Yeah.
for depression, but without therapy.
Yeah.
And so I think that the message is the companies in the psychedelic field minimize therapy. They don't even do therapy. Call it
No, I mean, and
psychological.
I agree. I think
Yeah.
That's not what's best for patients.
Yeah.
It's not what's best for society, but that's the direction that these companies are taking. And I think Lycos, unfortunately, may be going in that same direction.
Okay.
So something will get better, but
Okay.
something will get approved.
Thank you, Rick. And well, maybe we can talk another moment about other roads that can
Yeah.
be taken for.
Yeah, although drug policy reform failed on the ballot in America and Massachusetts, the Natural Plant Medicine Initiative
Uh-huh.
was on the ballot in Massachusetts. It got 43% yes, 57% no.
Uh-huh.
So I think drug policy reform, state level for psychedelics is going to be delayed at least 4 years.
Okay, well, but, so far so good, no? Also,
So no, it failed.
I mean, but if you think in 4 years it will be.
Maybe we need more science, we need more FDA approvals, we need to change public attitude.
Yeah,
So where
yeah,
Lyco said the public doesn't matter, actually the public matters more than the science.
yeah.
So now we got to get back.
But it's a matter of time finally, no? You think?
I think, yeah, I think it'll eventually be approved. Yeah.
Okay, okay.